Today, I am pleased to present using the ABE Instructional Framework for CASAS with Ramona Kunkel. And with that, because this is a short 30-minute session, I'm going to turn us right over to Ramona.
Great. Thank you, Ellen. So as Ellen said, this is using the ABE Instructional Framework for CASAS. What we're going to cover today is a real brief explanation as to why the ABE framework was created, why we should use the ABE framework, what it is, how to use it, and then at the end, we're going to talk a bit about lesson plans. Just so that I have an idea as to how many have seen the framework, if you could just put a Y or an N in the chat box if you have seen the framework. Okay, it looks like most of you have, a few haven't, which is what I expected. Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that information. Why was the ABE framework created? Just a brief explanation as to giving the history and the background. In the early 1990s, in this field, there was some accountability, but honestly, there was really very little. In the mid-1990s, there was a pretty significant scandal out of the DC chapter of the United Way of America. This made those who donate to charities a little skeptical and suspicious as to where and how their money was being used. To help remedy that, in the late 1990s, there was more accountability, and part of that was spearheaded by the United Way of America. They introduced the Kellogg Logic Model for all programs who were submitting a proposal to the United Way of America. That created a ripple effect, and it really spread out across other agencies and other nonprofit organizations. For those of you who are funded by the Maryland Department of Labor, you know that you are held to performance measure outcomes. And while the sanction piece of it has been temporarily put on hold, because of the pandemic, it is temporary and it will happen. So if your performance measure outcomes are not where you want them to be, this is the time to make those adjustments to get those percentages up to where you would like to see them. Why use the ABE framework? In a nutshell, quality instruction. The framework was created to help instructors have targeted instruction for those assessments. So there's a framework for CASAS, there's a separate one for TAPE. This way, instructors will know what their students will be tested on that specific assessment. Hopefully, this will lead to improved test scores. What is the ABE framework? Just a real brief overview. The College and Career Readiness Standards is still considered the gold standard for instruction. Some states have their own standards. That's based on the fact that they have their own unique requirements. Because that's not the case in Maryland, the CCRS continues to be the guiding principle for instruction. For your knowledge, the CASAS is aligned with the CCRS. So if your program requires you to align your lessons to CCRS, then go ahead and do that. However, if that's not the case, it may not be necessary to separate them out, knowing that the CASAS is aligned to the CCRS. I've included here a webinar that came out in 2014. It analyzes these standards and instructional materials. And if you're interested in the CASAS alignment to CCRS, you can go to the 2-minute and 15-second mark, and it will give you an explanation. I've also included a PowerPoint put out by CASAS that gives you an in-depth explanation about the CASAS goals, if that's of interest to you. There was a work group of 6 of us or 7 of us that put this together. And we all felt that if there was any place that you want your instructors to start, the checklist is the place to begin. It's a pretty complex, in-depth framework. We did that by design. It has different structures to it so that instructors can pick and choose what is of value to them. They are not going to use the entire framework. It's meant for them to pick out what is relevant and useful for their lesson planning. The checklists are divided out into the 6 ABE levels. It is a compilation of the skills on TABE and CASAS. Therefore, some of the skills on there may not necessarily be assessed on CASAS. However, we felt that they were skills that really all learners need to have under their belt, especially as they move on to employment and to college. These checklists are targeted skills that the instructor should work on with their students at that level. The other thing that this checklist does is it gives instructors an idea of what skills that student should have already mastered at the prior level or should be able to quickly obtain based on the level that they're at now. It also gives instructors an idea of where their students are moving to. So think of it as going on a trip. You can see where you started on the journey. You can see where you are now, but you also want to know what your where the destination is for your students, where they're going. The checklist also includes references to lesson plans, which we will look at the end. Here's one example. This is for ABE 4. It gives you the CASAS scale scores. And this is a list of the reading skills that are appropriate for ABE level 4. You'll see here that down here, about 2/3 of the way down, make inferences and draw conclusions. See Appendix A 84. Appendix A is where we house the lesson plans. If you go to page 84, you will see an example of a lesson plan that relates to that specific skill. And you can see underneath, we have another lesson plan. We did lesson plans for each of the ABE levels, and we did at least one lesson plan for reading, one for math, and one for functional and workplace skills. So you'll see there's a lesson plan here for Pythagorean theorem under math, and then another one for calculate proportions under functional and workplace skills. We separated out functional and workplace skills on this checklist because some instructors struggle with knowing what skills fall under workplace skills. Most of these are actually a math skill, but we separated out just for those who want that to know how workplace skills fit in this whole structure. We also included, for those who are interested, a chart that shows the correlation between the CASAS, CCRS, and NRS alignment so that they know how they all work together. This is really the heart of the framework. this is just one level. So to show level A, it shows you that the skills that are assessed at level A are language and vocabulary and reading comprehension skills. And then underneath that is just a real brief description that explains what is in those broader topics. This is just meant to be a broad picture idea of what is assessed at this level in the reading goals section. We went more in depth and showed all test forms for all the test levels. This is particularly helpful for programs, especially small ones, that find it very difficult to have leveled instruction, especially as programs move back to in-person instruction. So you can see that foundational literacy is only assessed at level A. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean that at levels B, C, and D, you no longer need those skills. Of course you need those skills. However, this is just meant to show that this is where those skills are assessed. Same thing with language and vocabulary. As you might imagine, it's going to be assessed at all levels. But reading and interpreting common high-frequency words and phrases in every context is only assessed at A and B. Again, of course, they need to know that at levels C and D. But this is to help instructors know and target their instruction so that they know what specific skills are going to be assessed at that level. Some programs stress the CASAS competencies. Again, we're not making any recommendation. Programs are free to work this however they feel benefits their instructors and their students the best. So basic communication is only assessed on forms 901, 902, and 905. Now, obviously, we all need basic communication. So that should work into your lessons regardless. But again, for the purpose of this framework, we show where it is being assessed. We did the same thing with math. Again, this shows levels A and B in math, shows number sense and algebra. This is only a piece of it. It's not the whole thing, but again, shows just real quick explanation as to what specific skills are within that broader topic. This is meant to be a big picture so that instructors know what is found in those at that level. We did the same thing, breaking it down even further. Of course, number sense is going to be across the board, but understanding place value and place value system is only assessed at levels A and B. Again, of course they need to know it at C and D, but it's only assessed at A and B. The other thing to show you here is that perform operations with multi-digit number, whole number, and decimals. That could be a lesson, but then you might have you would have differentiated instruction based on the individual lesson. It provides a way for instructors to teach a topic in which the entire class is participating. That way, students don't feel that they're being separated out. Okay, here's the smart group, here's the not so smart group. Everybody can do a topic, but then the level of instruction is broken down based on the student's needs. Did the same thing with the CASAS competencies so that you can see how the CASAS math goals and the CASAS competencies match up and can be taught that way. We also included the GED test competencies. Regardless of what level you're teaching, you want to know, again, where your students are headed. We only included the chart for level 2, but here's the link, and it's included in the framework, the link so that they can see level 3. We felt that just getting students to level 2 is a big enough hurdle for most students to get to. So we left it at that. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to use the framework for lesson planning. As I mentioned, Appendix A is the lesson plans. We included a variety of lesson plans. They are templates and examples only. We are not advocating or suggesting any lesson plan template over another one. We are not saying that these are better or preferred. It's just to show you that lesson plan templates can look very different. You want to use the one that is best for you or for your program. If your program prescribes a template, then please use that template. Some programs, they want to have consistency, and there's nothing wrong with that. Other programs allow instructors to have a little bit more freedom. Use the one that works for you. I'll also mention that learning objectives can be drawn from the CASAS competencies or the CCRS. Appendix B includes the correlation between the CCRS and the NRS EFL levels. So for those programs who put a little bit heavier emphasis on the CCRS, this gives a nice little snapshot of those skills listed out here and by each level. We did it for math, and we also did the same thing for reading. Appendix C is that pretty in-depth chart that some of you have seen that's put out by NRS. We included all the levels in the framework, and it just shows the basic reading and writing skills, and then the numeracy skills by these subtopics within each NRS level. We just provided as much information as we could, again, for you to pick and choose what works best for you. We're going to talk a little bit about lesson plans because they are included in our framework. And we did that especially for inexperienced instructors who may have never created a lesson plan. At a minimum, lesson plan should have a lesson title, objectives that should ideally be stated and or written on the board. You want your learners to know what's going to be covered in the lesson. You don't want them having to try and figure it out. Include the materials, how you're going to present it, how it's going to apply, and how it's going to be evaluated. We're going to look at 3 lesson plans. Here's one based on making inferences. It's for level 4. And you can see here that she included the CCRS standard because at this organization, they require a connection to the CCRS, and they want to see that on their lesson plans. The objectives. You want to see something like SWBAT, which is students will be able to. Again, you want to, the instructor should have figured out, thought through, where do I want my students to end up at the end of this? What do I want them to know? And ideally, you want your students to be able to have successfully gotten those skills under their belt. She included the materials, and she separated out the technology, and then just a real brief explanation as to introducing that topic. She included the practice, how it's going to be assessed. You want to make sure that your students understand the skill, and some homework. Again, ideally have some activity that students can do to reinforce those skills that they worked on in class and do it outside of the classroom time. Here's another one based on EFL level 3 and 4. You'll see here that under standards and competencies, they listed out the skills. And these are the skills that are on that checklist. This lesson covers a lot of skills, which is great because you get a lot in just one lesson. So use that space however you want to. It can be competencies, it can be standards, or it can just be the skills that you want to cover. Again, a brief description of the topic and the objectives. Students will be able to. What do I want them to be able to do at the end of this lesson? The materials, a step-by-step direction as to how this instructor is going to teach this lesson, and then the practice assessment extensions. She even included some modifications, allowing for small group work or popcorn reading. For those who may not know, popcorn reading is where the instructor randomly calls on a learner to read out loud, and then including the source. Going to look at one more. This is a lot on one page, but I included this because it is different. It is a different format. Here they put all of the competencies and standards on the left-hand side. They included the CASAS competency, the CCRS anchor, the GED skills, because this is a level 5, and the vocabulary. Again, the basic lesson plan, and then all the materials here, as well as the assessment and the reflection. I also included here the link to the adult low literacy curriculum modules. I think this is a great resource. It's right on the CASAS website for those who teach at the lower literacy levels. Definitely want to recommend that you check it out. I did forget to mention at the beginning of this, I would highly recommend, if you did not see the VTI session yesterday morning at 10 o'clock called Implementing the ABE Framework and CASAS Goals to Improve Measurable Skills Gains, put out by Harvard, I would highly recommend that you go and watch that when we have these all up on the website and they're archived. It was a great presentation that you might want to take a look at and see if it might work for your program. I'm going to take questions in a minute, but I'm going to put up my contact information. The best way to reach me is by email. I am happy to take any questions about lesson plans, about the ABE framework, even about instruction in general. It's my passion, it's my love. So I'm always happy to talk to anybody about this topic. Let's see. We are making all the Oh, great. Okay. So Jessie Thompson from Harvard, she's one of the ones that was part of the presentation, says that they're making all the curriculum correlation spreadsheets available. That's great. Thank you so much for being so willing to share all of your hard work. That's wonderful. So does anybody have any questions at all on this? I know this is an overview, but that's what it was meant to be. It was meant to be an overview because, like I said, it's a pretty lengthy document. So I would highly encourage you, if you start with nothing else, start with the checklist and the lesson plans. And then as you get further into it, any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to talk about this.